In this video, let's look at the concept of shape tweening. Shape tweens cannot be applied to symbols, movie clips, buttons, or graphic symbols. Shape tweens can only be applied to vector art. You'll notice in this particular file there's a form at the bottom of the screen that's morphing between a box and a box with a kind of curved side. In addition, there's a sphere shape that rises out of that curved shape and heads towards the top of the screen. It's important to note that a shape tween can include not only the change in the geometry, but also its position in space. The main timeline in this file is clean. There are no frame spans that muddy up the timeline at this location. Any motion tween or shape tween should be packaged up in its own movie clip. I've set up a test layer here where we can experiment with creating shape tweens. I'm going to start by creating a graphic with a rectangle tool. I've turned off my stroke color and I'm using just a simple yellow fill. The yellow box I've created sits on the main timeline, however it is vector art. What I want to do is package the vector art inside of a movie clip, and inside of that movie clip is where I'm going to work on my shape tween. Let's right click and convert this to a symbol, and I'm going to give it simply the name test, and I want to be certain that this is a movie clip I'm saving it as. And at some point I may want to be conscious of what the registration point is. For this experiment, we'll just leave it be the default. I'll double click on my new movie clip, and we now can confirm that we're in scene 1 inside the test movie clip. We see in the timeline here that all we have is just one frame and it contains our yellow graphic. I'm going to go to the Insert pull down menu and pull down to where it says Shape Tween. Once I release, I've now converted this into a shape tween. It doesn't do much because it sits in one frame, but you'll note that it has this green color. If I put my cursor somewhere out into the future in the timeline and press F6, I've now created a new keyframe. We can see that this will work because the line is continuous and there's an arrowhead on it. If you happen to have a shape tween without a keyframe in it, you'll see this line is dashed. That kind of a shape tween will not work. There always needs to be a keyframe at the end of the sequence for this to be able to animate. Now I'm going to deform the geometry that's parked inside my keyframe. If I move my cursor over the edge of the geometry, you notice that it changes slightly. There's a little arc on it. This means we can pull this edge and reshape it and cause it to be curved. We could do this all around the geometry, but in addition we can also modify it by using the Sub-Select tool. With this tool selected, if I click on my graphic, we can get a hold of various topological features and make adjustments to them, including points, edges, or handles that comprise curved edges. You'll notice now that I've made changes, if I scrub my playback head, we actually do see a change in the shape over time. However, it's changing in a kind of uncontrolled fashion. We have a remedy for that. If we go to our Modify pull down, we can pull down to where it says Shape, and inside the Shape rollout we can find where it says Add Shape Hint. We can place shape hints on the vertices that make up this geometry and thus control how it morphs. If I've placed a shape hint, then I want to move to the next keyframe and reposition that shape hint so that it makes sense for how I want this to change over time. I'm going to return to my first frame because it looks like one shape hint is not going to satisfy my needs. So I'm going to go to the Modify pull down, find Shape, find Add Shape Hint, and now we're going to use the upper right. We'll return to frame 24. We'll position that shape hint into the upper right corner. You'll notice that they snap right onto the topological features that make up a graphic. I'm going to return back to frame 1 and modify shape, add shape hint, and we'll add this in the lower right hand corner, and we'll reciprocate at frame 24 by pulling my third shape hint all the way down here to the lower right hand corner. You should see now when we scrub that it looks like with this particular geometry 3 shape hints are sufficient to constrain how it behaves. If you decide at some point you don't want the shape hints anymore, or you want to rework this and set up shape hints in a new place, you can also come back to Modify Shape and remove all the hints. I'm going to leave mine for right now. I want to go ahead and test this and see how this particular morph works with the rest of my scene. If I go back to the top of scene 1, we'll notice the shape hint that I produced here, packaged up in its own movie clip, now sits the main timeline and it only absorbs one frame. Let's go ahead and Control Test Movie in Flash Professional. We can see here when we test the movie that our new graphic pulses from frames 1 to 24 and back to frame 1. The original graphic that was on the screen here oscillates. It appears to go from frame 1 to 24 and then backwards. Let's see how easy it is to make our new graphic behave in the same way. If I double click on my yellow box and open it up, we'd like to show this same sequence in reverse. There's an easy way to do this. I'm going to go ahead and select all the frames that comprise my animation, and I'm going to go ahead and copy frames. Next, I'm going to put my cursor in frame 25, and I'm going to paste frames. Of course, now if we drag this back and forth, we'll notice that it just does the same thing. Okay? So if I highlight these new series of frames and come up to my modify pull down, and I pull down to where it says timeline, I can reverse my frames and cause them to play in the opposite direction. We should now see that this animates and reverses direction. However, we've got to go through the task of adding shape hints on these new keyframes. So with the shape hints placed on my second portion of this animation, you'll now notice that as I scrub the playback head, the shape slowly grows to frames 24 and 25 and then restores itself back to its original rectangular form.